Welcome to another episode of America's Deadliest Secret, UFO Whistleblower Silenced. On Life Facts Daily, we will be having insight on why people are dying to keep America's biggest secrets, and it may not be what you think. For the first time in U.S. history, congressional hearings have cracked open a door into one of the most explosive claims ever made, that the United States has been secretly recovering crashed UFOs and silencing anyone who dares to talk about it. During World War II, the Vatican allegedly tipped off American intelligence about a strange site once controlled by Mussolini's military. Hidden, there was something extraordinary, a mysterious craft, largely intact, and clearly not built by human hands. This isn't a sci-fi script. These are the claims of David Grusch, a decorated combat veteran and former senior intelligence officer. Grusch wasn't just another analyst. He worked at the highest levels of U.S. intelligence, even helping prepare the president's daily security briefings. If anyone was close to the nation's deepest secrets, it was him. And yet, what Grusch revealed shocked even seasoned insiders. He spoke of secret crash retrievals, recovered non-human bodies, and even the possibility of direct contact with beings not from this world. But here's the chilling part. Grusch insists the U.S. government would kill to keep this hidden. So why hasn't he presented his evidence in public? Because the proof, he says, is locked inside the most secure vaults of the intelligence community. He can only share it in a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, where America's most guarded secrets are buried away. Still, Grusch's claims carried enough weight that the Inspector General of the intelligence community labeled them credible and demanding immediate action. That designation alone means something extraordinary was found. But what could be so dangerous that exposing it might cost lives? Grusch describes years of interviews with military and intelligence officials. More than 40 people, all claiming first-hand knowledge of crash retrieval operations. Some of them revealed that along with mysterious craft, non-human biologics had been recovered. In plain terms, alien bodies. But that wasn't the worst revelation. What disturbed him most was the trail of crimes allegedly committed to keep the program hidden, including harassment, intimidation, and murder. Becoming a whistleblower nearly cost him his own life. He says he was threatened, followed, and even saw colleagues targeted. Yet, when he brought his concerns up the chain of command to intelligence committees in both the Senate and House, nothing was done. It was as if the system itself was designed to ignore him. Fearing history might repeat the abuses of MK Ultra, the CIA's infamous mind control program, Grusch decided he had no choice left but to go public. That's when the harassment escalated. His personal medical records were leaked to the press in an effort to discredit him. Phone calls came at night. Subtle threats followed him everywhere. And that's just the beginning. Because if Grusch is telling the truth, then what's hiding behind this secret program isn't only about UFOs. It may be about who really controls America's most dangerous technologies and how far they'll go to silence the truth. When David Grusch went public, the government could have easily dismissed him. They could have called him delusional, discredited his service record, or exposed lies in his testimony. But instead, something stranger happened. For 2 years, Congress has been asking for a secure SCIF to review Grusch's classified evidence, and the intelligence community has refused to provide it. If there's nothing to hide, why block lawmakers from simply listening behind closed doors? The answer may lie in where the UFO crash materials ended up. According to Grusch and other insiders, the government made a fateful decision decades ago. Rather than keeping recovered technology within official military programs, much of it was allegedly handed over to private aerospace companies, giants like Lockheed and Boeing. Why? Because once those materials were in corporate hands, they became shielded from freedom of information requests and even from congressional oversight. A secret too big for democracy was hidden in plain sight, inside the boardrooms of billion-dollar defense contractors. And when reporters have asked these companies directly about Grusch's claims, their responses have been suspiciously evasive. Instead of simply saying, "We don't have UFOs," they redirect all questions back to the Pentagon. That's not denial, that's deflection. The timing makes this even more curious. In 2023 and 2024, Congress introduced provisions in the National Defense Authorization Act that would have forced private aerospace companies to hand over any UFO materials to the government through eminent domain. If they didn't comply, they'd face severe legal penalties. But just as these provisions gained momentum, they were quietly blocked in the Senate. Powerful lawmakers, names like Mitch McConnell, Mike Rogers, and Mike Turner, worked to strip the law of its strongest disclosure requirements. Coincidence? Or protection of interests far bigger than politics? Meanwhile, whistleblowers like Grusch say the retaliation only worsened. He wasn't alone. Others who try to speak up have described intimidation campaigns, threatening phone calls, and even attempts on their lives. Take whistleblower Luis Elizondo, the man who leaked the famous Navy UFO videos in 2017. In an interview, he warned the public, "I'm not prone to accidents. I'm not abusing drugs. I'm not engaged in any illicit activities. If something happens to me or my family, you'll know what happened." Think about that. A former intelligence official forced to publicly announce he's not suicidal because the threats against him were so credible. Then there's Jake Barber, a military helicopter pilot who says he flew recovery missions for unidentified craft. On one operation, Barber helped lift what he described as an egg-shaped object. As the helicopter strained against its weight, Barber felt a wave of overwhelming sadness, as if the object itself was projecting emotion into him. He was reduced to tears mid-flight, nearly unable to control the aircraft. Barber later discovered that others had similar experiences. He now works with a group that claims psychics can influence UFO sightings and even communicate with them. It sounds unbelievable, but history offers chilling parallels. The CIA's remote viewing programs during the Cold War, and even President Jimmy Carter admitting that a psychic once helped the agency locate a crashed plane in Africa with pinpoint accuracy. But Barber's testimony also carried a darker revelation. He alleged that investigators themselves, people assigned by Congress to probe the crash retrieval program, were so terrified of retaliation that they asked him for advice on how to protect themselves. Imagine that: government investigators, afraid for their own lives, seeking survival tips from the very whistleblowers they were supposed to be protecting. If Barber is telling the truth, it means a secret cabal exists, not just within the military, but stretching into intelligence agencies and private aerospace companies, with the power to intimidate, threaten, and even kill. A hidden hand that answers to no one, not even Congress. And if that's the case, then what they're hiding may be even more dangerous than UFOs themselves. If you think the harassment of modern whistleblowers is shocking, history shows it's nothing new. For decades, UFO researchers who got too close to the truth have found themselves stalked, discredited, or destroyed. One of the most infamous cases is that of Paul Bennewitz. In the late 1970s, Bennewitz lived near Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. Fascinated by the strange lights in the sky, he set up cameras and radio equipment, convinced he was recording UFO activity. What he didn't know was that he had accidentally stumbled into something the U.S. Air Force desperately wanted hidden. Bennewitz contacted the base's Office of Special Investigations. Instead of protecting him, they targeted him. Officials began feeding him false information, planting fake documents, and even staging UFO events for him to record. They told him he was in contact with aliens, that he was uncovering a galactic secret war. But it was all a lie, a disinformation campaign designed to break him. And it worked. Over the years, the non-stop stream of planted evidence and psychological pressure drove Bennewitz into a breakdown. By 1988, he was hospitalized with severe paranoia and psychosis. Once a respected researcher, he withdrew completely from the UFO community, living out the rest of his life in obscurity until his death in 2003. The Bennewitz case proved one terrifying point. The U.S. government is willing to psychologically destroy its own citizens in order to protect a secret. And if they could do that to an innocent civilian, what would they do to insiders like Grusch, Barber, or Elizondo? But the story doesn't stop there. In the 1990s, another man, Phil Schneider, went public with claims even wilder than Benowitz's. Schneider said he worked on deep underground military bases, massive subterranean cities hidden beneath the deserts of the American Southwest. According to him, construction teams even had violent encounters with non-human beings living underground. Schneider claimed he was injured in one such confrontation, losing fingers in a firefight with hostile entities. Whether you believe his story or not, what happened next is chilling. In 1996, Phil Schneider was found dead in his apartment. A rubber catheter had been tied tightly around his neck. His death was ruled a suicide, but skeptics point out disturbing details. Schneider had limited mobility in his arms, suffered from advanced cancer, and was missing multiple fingers. How could he have tied the ligature himself? Even stranger, when his body was found, much of his research, photographs, lecture notes, and classified documents he claimed to possess, had vanished. To this day, some insist Schneider was silenced for what he revealed. Others argue he was a fraud whose failing health drove him to desperation. But either way, his death left a warning etched into UFO history. Speaking out can cost you everything. And maybe that's the point. Whether through psychological warfare like Benowitz or suspicious deaths like Schneider, the message to anyone considering whistleblowing is clear. Stay quiet or pay the price. But if you think those are isolated stories, you're mistaken. Because behind the curtain of UFO secrecy lies a trail of shadowy programs, cover-ups, and even CIA experiments where death was an accepted outcome. And some of those projects are confirmed, not speculation. When you look at the lengths the government has gone to silence UFO witnesses, it starts to resemble something more than secrecy. It looks like a pattern, one rooted in the darkest traditions of the intelligence community. Take MK Ultra, for example. Officially, it was a CIA program that ran from the 1950s to the 1970s, aimed at mastering mind control. Using LSD, hypnosis, electroshock therapy, and sensory deprivation, the CIA experimented on thousands of people, often without their consent. Some were prisoners, others were mental patients, and some were just everyday civilians caught in the crossfire. The goal was chilling, to create techniques for manipulating human behavior, controlling memory, and even programming assassins. And while Congress eventually exposed MK Ultra, much of the documentation was destroyed in 1973. What survives is only a fraction of what really happened. Now, imagine that mindset applied to UFO secrecy. If intelligence agencies were willing to drug and torture their own citizens for control experiments, do you really think they would hesitate to psychologically break, or even eliminate, those exposing the biggest secret in human history? Some researchers argue that MK Ultra's techniques never truly ended. They simply went underground. And that might explain why UFO whistleblowers often describe not just intimidation, but something stranger, a psychological fog, a sense of being played with. In one declassified case, the CIA admitted to testing psychotronic weapons, devices that could project sounds or sensations directly into the human brain. If those technologies existed decades ago, what might they be capable of now? Consider the claims of John Burroughs, a U.S. Air Force sergeant involved in the famous Rendlesham Forest UFO incident of 1980. After approaching a glowing object in the woods, Burroughs collapsed, his heart mysteriously damaged. For decades, the government refused to release his medical records, until finally admitting that he had been exposed to radiation consistent with an unknown craft. Or look at Dr. Stephen Greer's disclosure witnesses, dozens of military and intelligence personnel who went on record describing crash retrieval programs. Several reported that after speaking out, they experienced break-ins, strange phone calls, and health problems that seemed more than coincidence. The implication is horrifying. Whistleblowers may not just be silenced by threats, but by technologies designed to make their deaths look natural. Heart attacks, strokes, cancers accelerated unnaturally fast, all written off as chance. But what if they weren't chance at all? And the deeper you dig, the more chilling the connections become. Documents link some MK Ultra scientists to secret aerospace programs in the 1980s. If those individuals carried over their expertise, then the UFO cover-up may not just be about technology, it may be about weaponizing the human mind itself. Which brings us to a disturbing question. What if the UFO secret isn't only about alien craft? What if it's about control? Control of information, control of human consciousness, and control of anyone who dares to reveal the truth. If UFOs have crashed on Earth, and if technology has been recovered, then where is it? Why hasn't Congress seen it? Why hasn't the public been told? The answer, according to multiple whistleblowers, may not lie inside a government vault at all, but inside the corporate laboratories of defense contractors. For decades, insiders have whispered that companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon were quietly handed access to recovered materials. The logic was simple. Once alien technology was placed in private hands, it became insulated from oversight. Congress couldn't demand it. Journalists couldn't FOIA it. The truth was buried behind the iron curtain of corporate secrecy. This isn't just speculation. In 2017, Dr. Eric Davis, a physicist who worked for a Pentagon UFO program, told the New York Times he had briefed the Defense Department on off-world vehicles not made on this Earth. Davis later claimed that crash materials were held by aerospace contractors, but even high-ranking Pentagon officials were denied access. And when Congress tried to change that, the resistance was fierce. In 2023, lawmakers introduced the UAP Disclosure Act, which would have forced private companies to surrender any UFO materials to the government through eminent domain. But just as it gained traction, the strongest provisions were stripped out, blocked by powerful senators with close ties to the defense industry. Follow the money, and the pattern becomes clear. The very same senators who gutted disclosure laws are those receiving millions in donations from defense contractors. Coincidence, or protection of a secret worth trillions? Because think about what's at stake. If just one piece of alien technology, an energy source, a propulsion system, a material stronger than anything on Earth, were revealed, it could reshape the global economy overnight. Fossil fuels would collapse. Airlines and car companies would be obsolete. Energy companies would be destroyed. Entire industries, trillions of dollars, wiped out in heartbeat. Is it any wonder that corporations might fight to keep that technology locked away? Not for humanity's benefit, but for control and for profit. Some researchers believe these companies are not just hiding UFO materials, but actively reverse engineering them in black projects that the public will never see. And when insiders get too close, they face the same dangers as government whistleblowers. One anonymous engineer claimed that while working on a classified propulsion system, he was told point blank by his superior, "If you talk about this, you won't live to regret it." The engineer walked away from the program, but not before describing technology so advanced it defied physics, materials that seemed weightless, and power systems that produced energy from nowhere. If true, it means corporations may already possess technology decades, or even centuries beyond what the public knows. But instead of sharing it, they keep it buried, drip-feeding small advances to maintain control over the world's energy, weapons, and transportation industries. And here's the kicker. If corporations really are holding alien technology, then the U.S. government may no longer be in charge at all. Instead, the most powerful secrets on Earth may belong to unelected executives, shielded by money, influence, and deniability. Which raises the darkest possibility of all. Disclosure may never come from the government, because the government itself is no longer in control. Throughout history, those who've gotten too close to the UFO secret often meet the same fate: silence. Sometimes through intimidation, sometimes through ruined reputations, and sometimes through death. Take James Forrestal, America's first Secretary of Defense. In 1949, just 2 years after the alleged Roswell crash, Forrestal began warning friends that forces inside the government were keeping UFO secrets hidden. Shortly after, he was hospitalized for exhaustion. Within weeks, he was found dead, his body sprawled on the ground after falling from a 16-story window at Bethesda Naval Hospital, officially ruled a suicide. But the hospital had placed a guard to watch him 24/7. Somehow, that night, the guard wasn't there. Coincidence? Or something darker? Then there's Dr. Robert Sarbacher, a Pentagon scientist who hinted in the 1950s that America was studying non-terrestrial materials. He stopped speaking publicly after being warned his communications were being monitored. Decades later, researchers who tracked him down reported he was terrified to say more, insisting, "I know what I saw, but I value my life." And perhaps the most chilling is Phil Schneider, the engineer who claimed he'd worked on deep underground military bases and had direct encounters with non-human entities. In 1996, he was found dead in his apartment, a catheter tube tied around his neck. The coroner called it suicide. His friends called it murder. His lecture notes and documents were missing. The list goes on. Pilots who reported UFOs only to die in mysterious crashes. Researchers struck by sudden cancers. Insiders who warned they weren't suicidal, only to take their own lives days later. Even David Grusch, the whistleblower at the heart of today's hearings, admitted under oath that people inside the UFO program have been murdered to protect the secret. And if that's true, then the UFO cover-up isn't just the greatest secret in American history, it's the deadliest. And that's where we leave the story for now. The evidence is stacking higher than ever. Whistleblowers silenced, laws blocked, deaths that look like anything but coincidence, and a trail of secrets that doesn't just lead to UFOs, but to the very heart of who really controls our world. But here's the truth. The more they try to bury this, the more it refuses to stay buried. Every question we ask brings us one step closer to the answer they fear the most. So what do you think? Are UFOs being hidden to protect national security or to protect corporate power? Are whistleblowers risking their lives to warn us or being used in a game far bigger than any of us can see? Let's hear your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspective matters more than you know. If you found this story eye-opening, and if you want to see the continuation of this series, where we dive even deeper into the shadows, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. It helps us beat the algorithms trying to keep stories like this from reaching you. And if you believe in the mission of bringing hidden truths to light, smash that like button and share this video with someone who still thinks UFOs are just science fiction. Because one day, the truth will come out. The only question is, will you be ready when it does? Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like our channel. Life Facts Daily.